As the nursery rhyme goes, first comes love, then comes marriage, then comes the woman with a baby carriage. But what if the woman doesn't want the baby carriage?
The world perceives child-free women in the most negative light possible.
I think it's not a need for women anymore. We don't need to have children. We find that our own happiness is more important. Our own mental health is more important.
We have been called selfish. We've been called narcissists, which is kind of strange.
Kia ora, I'm Shalise Tansey, and today on The Detail, declining birth rates, pro-natalism, and the choice to be child-free.
We are also seeing, of course, an increasing proportion who are choosing either not to have children or to have one child. So I think that's a huge cultural shift.
That was Paul Spoonley. Later on in the podcast, I'll talk to him about some of the reasons behind choosing to be child-free, as well as some foreign governments' push for a baby boom. But first, we start with Danny Duncan. She is the founder of the Others Club. It's a community of people who are child-free by choice or by circumstance, as well as for people who are on the fence about having children. Danny has made the decision not to have children, and I started by asking her how she got there.
I always thought I was going to become a mother, just kind of thought it was inevitable. And then when I turned 30, I really started thinking about the timing of it. And as I was thinking about what that was going to mean for my life, having children, I realized that I didn't actually have a desire to have children. And I was on the fence for about, I would say, a good 2 years, kind of going back and forth and figuring out what I actually wanted. Because when you are a woman, there's a lot of pressure, and also society puts, I guess, this expectation on women that they're going to become mothers from when you're a little girl. So it was kind of unpacking all of that and figuring out what I actually wanted. And then, I guess I fully decided when I was about 32 that I was going to not have children.
And 2 years is a long time to think like that is a well thought out decision. Were there any kind of external factors or any particular reasons why you felt like you just didn't feel the need to have any children?
No, there was no reasons in terms of like why I didn't need to have children. I just didn't want them. Like, it's kind of as simple as that. When it boils down, I actually just didn't want to have children. But I think when I go deeper, a lot of it is around my lifestyle. I really like my life the way that it is. I work for myself. My days are really flexible. I travel quite a bit. Like, the lifestyle that I have would have had to have changed a lot if I was to have children, especially in today's world where, to do everything, they say women can't do it all. And I think some women can, but I think you've got to have the finances to be able to do it. And I don't. Yeah, there's a lot of reasons why I don't want to have children, but I think for other women, I think it's perfectly okay just to say, I don't want them, and that's enough.
And you mentioned that you thought that maybe one day that you might have children, and a lot of people, they go, I just have this inner feeling or this inner want or need to have children. Did you ever feel that?
No, never ever did I feel a desire to have children. It was more just I had never seen anyone making the decision not to. It just wasn't even on my radar that I could make a decision not to have children. Everyone in my world was having children. Most things that I saw on TV or books, like the world kind of pushes it down women's throat that you are going to become a mother. But I didn't have that yearning, or, when I hear of other people speak about, like, I always knew I wanted to become a mother, and it was, when they see a baby, they feel feel certain things. Like, I just never had that. And don't get me wrong, I adore children. So I think that's why I was on the fence for so long, because I really like kids. I really like babies. In my previous career, I worked with children. So separating my enjoyment that I have around children with a decision to have them in my life 24/7 for the next, 18 years. It was quite hard for me to do that. And also I've had people say to me, oh, you're going to be a great mum one day, like all of that kind of stuff. It was just really hard to separate all of that with actually what I wanted my future to look like.
Because there can be a lot of commentary when women choose not to have children. Like you said, you love children, but it's just not for you. But sometimes, like, there can be people that go, you just must not like children. You choosing not to have children is quite selfish. How do people saying that, how does that make you feel?
I think in the beginning I found it really difficult, and I think the biggest thing I find hard still to this day is people's misperceptions of me, or people misunderstanding who I am as a person because I don't want to have kids. I think a lot of people have this idea of what a child-free woman is, and the only way that they can kind of fit us into their world or fit us into their understanding is putting us into a box. And sure, some women don't like being around children, which I think is absolutely fair. And I'm personally not like that. Like, that's not who I am as a child-free person. But I think a lot of people do. I mean, they say it to me like, oh, you just don't like kids, or you just don't like mums, or they just have quite a negative perception of who I am, which I don't anymore feel a need to prove who I am. I don't feel a need to, prove that I'm good with kids, or that I have lots of mum friends. It's just, if they don't take the time to get to know me, then I guess that's on them. So, yeah, it's a lot easier these days.
And how did your family and friends react when you said to them that you've made the choice not to have children?
I'm really lucky. They were super supportive. I have 2 sisters, 1 brother, and they all have children. At the time when I said I wasn't going to have kids, I think there was already 1 child in our family. Like, I had 1 niece. And I guess my mum knew that my other sister, my sister was going to be having kids as well. So I think maybe I am the oldest child, and I think potentially if there was no kids on the horizon yet, mum may have been a little bit more disappointed, which I fully understand because she loves being a grandma.
And so you never felt that pressure from friends and family to potentially change your mind then?
I didn't feel the pressure. I think occasionally it's been said to me like, oh, but it's okay if you change your mind. And to me, that actually did feel a little bit dismissive, because it felt like they didn't believe me when I said I didn't want to have kids. Whereas you don't say to, people that say they want to become a mum, oh, but you might change your mind. So I felt that kind of double standard to be disappointing. But I also think that the people that said that to me personally, they just wanted what was best for me. And I think they didn't know what it would be like to not have children. They only know the world of women becoming mothers, and how beautiful that can be. And so they just wanted what was best for me. But now they would never say that to me, because they understand my choice, that it's valid, that a woman can say she doesn't want to have kids, and you can just leave it at that. It doesn't, you don't have to kind of have all the caveats that go with it.
And how has your decision to be child-free impacted your relationship with others?
I think naturally things do shift. I think my best friend is a mum, and we used to go out probably once a week. We'd go to a cafe, catch up. We don't do that anymore, but we do still make the time for one another. That time just looks quite different. And you definitely have to, I guess, let go of things can't be the same as they always were. Children take up a lot of energy and someone's priority, which I completely understand, but there's still an element of like grieving that has to change.
And that grief that you mentioned, I feel like that's an element that isn't really talked about a lot, because you stand by that decision and you feel strong-footed, and that's not going to change, but you can still grieve parts of it. Like you said, the friendships that change, life looks differently. How has
Yeah.
that impacted you?
I think one of the things is, as a woman, and I think that this is hard for, both mothers and child-free women, is that you are celebrated when you get married, you're celebrated when you announce a pregnancy and have a baby, and there's not a lot of us that women are actively celebrated for. Um, and so I feel for that for mothers too. I think a lot of mothers are not seen outside of the fact that they had a baby. And so yeah, when you're child free, I feel like I almost had to be okay with the fact that I wasn't going to get celebrated for those. It sounds really weird to say, but yeah, I think there's an element of being like, okay, I'm not going to be seen by, the baby shower, whatever. I'm actually going to be seen by nothing. And so I'm really active on child-free women noticing the things that they can celebrate in their lives and being open and confident in that, and other people noticing that as well. Um, yeah, so I guess that's one thing that you kind of let go of. I also personally, there are things that if I do think about what a future could have looked like with children, I do grieve that. Like, I do think I would have been a really good mum in some aspects. I love even just little things like I would have loved to pick outfits for my daughter. Like, I love clothes. I love doing that kind of thing. I won't get to do that. But I think every choice in life, you can't have it all. You have to, there's always going to be what ifs, there's always going to be little regrets. That is just what it means to make choices in life. So I'm okay with that. I'm okay with, there's things that I will never get to experience, but there's also a lot that I gain.
And Danny is far from the only person making the choice not to have kids. Here's Massey University Professor Paul Spoonley, who is an expert in social and demographic changes.
What we're seeing is an increasing number of New Zealand women, particularly millennials, are choosing not to have children. Sometimes they choose to have one and be done. And of course, they're having children much later in life. But we now know what's happening in terms of our total fertility rate, and that it is declining, and declining quite significantly.
And why are we seeing more women choose not to have children or have less children?
The international evidence is that there are two key factors. One is the increasing level of educational qualifications of women, and the second is their participation in the workforce. So when we see increasing levels of both, particularly given that in many courses at university now, 2/3 of the students are now women, then they're making choices about their fertility. But I think there are a couple of other additional factors. One is the cost of having children. And of course, when we've got increasing costs of, for example, housing or the daily cost of living, then there's an increasingly economic dimension. Can I afford to have children? Do I want to have children and not have a house? And the fourth factor, I think, is the concern, particularly amongst millennials and I think Generation Z, that the environment is important. So can I have children and not impact upon the environment? And I think that's one of the questions that is being raised by new generations of women.
Becoming more educated and thinking more about the environment, these seem to be all really good factors. Do you think that it's potentially maybe a good thing that women are choosing not to have kids or maybe putting it off later?
It's an interesting question because, of course, declining fertility is impacting upon the size of our population, whether it's growing, and of course, increasingly the number of children appearing in our education system and then ultimately in the workforce. So over the next 2 decades, the declining fertility will certainly have an impact upon the availability of workers inside New Zealand. So we would expect that that number to go down. So many employers, many sectors are going to struggle to get the workers that they need. It's a very interesting phenomena because I think there's quite a significant cultural shift. And if you look back, I'm a baby boomer, and if you look back at my parents, my father and mother were one of 6 and one of 8. They had 2, my sister and myself. But when we look forward to our children who are millennials, then increasingly the number of children being born in families in New Zealand is declining. That's not true for Māori and Pacifica, by the way, but generally we've seen that decline. So it's just a matter of a fact of life that we're not having as many children as we would have seen, certainly in the pre-baby boomer generations. And one of the fun facts that I like to repeat is that in recent years, there have been about 1,000 more children born to women aged 40 and above compared to women aged 20 and below in New Zealand. So we can see that shift to having children later in life, but we are also seeing, of course, an increasing proportion who are choosing either not to have children or to have one child. So I think that's a huge cultural shift. And the interesting thing about that is that even though it's occurring around the world, there is no government that has found a way of reversing that. So if we compare ourselves with Sweden, where you get 480 days paid parental leave, and 45 of those days can be allocated to grandparents, by the way, which is very generous compared to what we see in New Zealand. The Swedish fertility rate is exactly the same as New Zealand. So there have been all these measures put in place to try and halt or reverse fertility decline. And there are literally no examples of them succeeding. So I think fertility decline is simply part of our demographic future.
Sweden isn't the only country providing incentives to help improve their fertility rate. The US administration has boarded the baby boom train, also known as the pro-natalist movement. Babies born between 2025 and 2028 will receive a $1,000 deposit into their Trump account, essentially a savings account. They've also made some IVF treatments more affordable. These policies aren't surprising, given that Vice President Vance and President Trump have made their intentions clear.
I want more babies in the United States of America, and I want beautiful young men and women who are eager to welcome them into the world and eager to raise them.
I'll be known as the fertilization president, that's okay. That's not bad.
Last year, there was a natal conference in Texas, also known as NatalCon, where speakers included eugenicists. Also last year, a regional government in Russia started offering cash incentives for college students under 25 who had babies. In China, for decades, it was illegal for families to have more than one child, with limited exceptions. In 2015, the law changed to allow families to have 2 children, and 6 years later, the rule progressed further, and now couples can have up to 3 children. The policy was changed because of concerns around China's aging population and their low fertility rate. China has also removed the previous tax exemption on contraception to try to de-incentivize it, along with adding other financial incentives, but none of it's working.
China's population is still declining, and at the beginning of each year we get the figures for the year previously, and I think we expect this year that the new data coming out will say that in 2025 China's population will be declining for the 4th year in a row.
Why are Chinese couples now thinking twice about big families?
Well, this is the big question that is bothering demographers everywhere. And to be fair, this is not a problem that only China is facing. There are only theories because actually no population, when decline starts, actually managed to turn that trend, like Japan and like in Taiwan. But some of the theories that go in the Chinese case are, for example, the education of women.
It's really interesting to look around the world, and you look at Hungary, and for each child you get a discount of your personal income tax liability. And if you have 4 children, you don't have to pay income tax at all. So there are these incentives that exist, and there are instructions that have come from governments, and typically male politicians, I might note, to have more children. But none of that has worked. I can't think of anything which has had a significant impact upon fertility decline. So in the case of Sweden, yes, they're much more generous than we are. Yes, they put in place various provisions which try and encourage people to think about having children. And it had an immediate and short-term effect, but in fact, the long-term effect is that Sweden is seeing fertility decline, as we all are. So it's very difficult to think of any situation or any policy or any instruction which would work in these circumstances. The decisions are made by individuals in the privacy of their own homes and given their personal circumstances. And it's almost impossible to think about policy changes or incentives offered by governments or offered by organizations which would actually have a significant impact on those fertility decisions.
Back to Danny, who, as I mentioned earlier, is the founder of the Others Club, named after the Kiwi book Otherhood. Danny came up with the idea 2 years ago, and till now it's all been on social media. This month, she's launching a new platform. Her purpose is to build a global community for people who are child-free.
When I was on the fence, I think that's the time that it helped the most, because in my world, as I said, I didn't have anyone I knew that was choosing not to have children. So having a connection to people that understood kind of my difficulties of deciding, and then when I did decide, understanding that decision, and I didn't have to explain myself to them. I didn't have to, give my reasons or, explain that I'm still a good person. They just got it. And so it's been hugely helpful for me. And it continues to be, just knowing that I have a community of people, because I do get a lot of hate and trolling in my job, and just knowing that I have a community of people that understand me, accept me, and that completely get it is, hugely helpful.
That's it for today. The Detail is a newsroom production supported by RNZ and New Zealand On Air. Thank you to Danny Duncan and Paul Spoonley. This episode was produced by Gwen McClure and engineered by Chris Wethy. I'm Shalise Tansey, Mā te wā.